D9, rezoning application number RZ100734, bylaw number 9275.
Your Worship, the applicant is proposing to rezone the subject property to facilitate the future development of a residential neighborhood offering a mix of housing forms, including commercial zoning intended to offer daily needs amenities. In order to facilitate the proposed development, the applicant has applied to rezone the subject property from AF Agriculture and Forestry and U1 Minor Utility to C3 Neighborhood Commercial, RM3 Multiple Residential, RS2 Single Residential, RT3 Residential Cluster, and AG Greenbelt as shown on Appendix A. Also included with this application is a proposed text amendment to the C3 zone to allow retail liquor as a principal use on the subject property only. Administration is supportive of this application as it's consistent with the policy direction provided in the official community plan and the guiding recommendations of the North Nechako Neighborhood Plan. As the application is consistent with the policy direction of the OCP, a public hearing will not be held. In accordance with the requirements set out in the Local Government Act and our Development Procedures Bylaw, property owners and tenants adjacent to the subject property were notified of the zoning amendments proposed under bylaw number 9275. No items of correspondence were received in response to this proposed bylaw. However, included as an attachment to the report package is the public consultation summary report provided by the applicant. Administration is also recommending that final reading of this bylaw be withheld until administration has received a traffic impact analysis, a servicing brief, and registration of a Section 219 covenant that restricts apartment housing to a maximum of 2 buildings with a maximum of 36 dwellings per building, and that no housing apartment forms from the development of, the covenant would also restrict housing apartment forms on the southwest corner of the RM3 zoned portion of the property. And a final item of final reading would be the registration of another Section 219 covenant that restricts 2-unit housing to be limited and dispersed and asymmetrically designed. I'm happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you. For first and second reading, Councillor Skaken, and then Frizzell.
Well, thank you, Worship. Just a question. Is this for Brink Holdings?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay. This is an awkward position I'm in, but I got a campaign donation from him, and I have a lot of respect for John Brink, but as a result of that donation, I'm going to back out of this vote because of the perception of a conflict of interest, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Frizzell.
The same. Okay. Mayor Hall. Thank you.
Councillor Ramsey.
Mayor Hall, we're going to lose quorum on this item. Several of us have received donations from Mr. Brink. I'm just through to quorum. Administration.
No, I'll go to Councillor Scott has her hand up as well. Mr. Babbage, I think I'm wanting to avoid putting you on a spot to give advice because quite frankly, that's not your role. But in fact, we do have, I would suspect, a process here. But if we don't have quorum, we don't get through this recommendation this evening. So Councillor Ramsey, are you, I'm going to ask Council just to sit tight and turn it over to Mr. Babbage.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, as you've indicated, it isn't staff's role to provide advice to members of council as to whether or not they are in a conflict of interest, but we can provide information. And the information is that what is provided in the information packages and information sessions to members of council is that campaign contributions in and of themselves do not constitute a conflict of interest. If there's additional concerns over and above the campaign contributions, then that is a different matter. But, Your Worship, for what it's worth, that's the information that has been provided publicly.
Thank you. So I think it really lands on the shoulders of each one of the council members, and your determination on whether you proceed is what I'm hearing. Mr. Babbage?
Yes, Your Worship. Administration can't advise a member of council whether they're in conflict or not, but we can provide information that campaign contributions in and of themselves does not constitute a conflict of interest.
And as chair, I'm certainly not prepared to provide any as well. So,
Mayor Hall, is it possible to call back Councillor Frizzell and Councillor Skaken so they can also receive that information?
We could. So Councillor Frizzell, Councillor Skake, and Mr. Babbage has not given advice, has just given specifics, so I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll repeat what I've said already to the rest of Council. Administration cannot provide individual advice to a member of Council as to whether or not they are in a conflict of interest, but generally speaking, administration has advised Council, and it's well known that campaign contributions in and of themselves do not constitute a conflict of interest as things stand now. If there are additional considerations, additional relationship issues, then that's for each member of Council to consider independently, Your Worship. Okay,
thank you very much. Councillor Ramsey, you good?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Sampson on...
I'm still going to back out of the vote, Your Worship, because there's also case law, I believe, on the percentage of the contribution for your overall campaign. So larger the donation, the smaller amount that you spend. So I'm still going to back up, but I appreciate the advice.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, Council, if we are in the midst of potentially losing quorum, then we need to make a decision, Mr. Babbage, on whether we postpone the voting on recommendation 1 and 2 this evening and move it to a new council. So I've got Councillor Scott, Councillor Sampson, you still in the queue? Okay, Councillor Scott, and then McConaughey.
Thank you, Your Worship. In my situation, I don't have any issue with staying in for the vote.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor McConaughey.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hall. Well, this is something new that hasn't come up. I mean, we have an election every 4 years, and I understand other councillors may feel uncomfortable. My question, I guess, is we all get donations to run our campaigns, and when would a potential influence, if you will, begin and end? Does that mean we can't vote for the rest of the year on contributors or people that contribute to our campaign? Or is it just 30 days? Is it till the election? When does it begin and end? So I think this is going to cause a problem if we go down this road, where every 4 years we recuse ourselves for the next term when a potential donor comes up for an entire term. I'm comfortable that I can make a decision with a clear heart and an open mind, and regardless of who donated to my campaign or who did not, everybody will be treated fair and equally. I just think it's a slippery road to go down. We're going to find ourselves with an ineffective council that can't make decisions, and I'm not certain what the defined period of abstaining, if you will, from campaign supporters. So I will stay and vote. I have no appetite to hold this business up from moving forward past tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Sampson, then over to Councillor Everett, and then Ramsey.
Sorry, thanks, Your Worship. I was just going to, when I jumped in earlier, move to defer if we were losing quorum, but it sounds like we may not. Similar position on this as Councillor McConaughey. I don't at this time have a campaign donation from that individual, but my comments were going to be the same as where does it begin and where does it end if somebody does contribute to your campaign? Where does it begin and where does it end, I guess, is my end of the day comment. So I'll be staying in on this, of course. I don't have a conflict, but I think my only question would be to Mr. Babbage, is there, I know administration can't provide advice, but how, since this is now a topic of discussion, how does that clarity get provided? I know what you've said is saying campaign contributions don't play into conflict of interest, but obviously there's differing opinions.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the community charter also provides that a member of council should obtain legal advice if they declare a conflict, and if they then learn through legal advice independent legal advice outside of the municipality, that they are not in conflict, then they would be permitted to return back to council chambers and vote on the matter, Your Worship. So that's another option for members of council.
Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. I'm comfortable to stay in on this, and I think a general statement that I would make is that we're elected to this position to serve this position all the way through the term, and I intend to do that. And if depending what happens in this election going forward, that will be a different council moving forward. But our job is to continue to be councillors right through to the very end of this term. So I will be doing that until the end of this term.
There's a reason we have an inaugural event on November 7th. It's because this council has been elected in 2018 to conduct work until November 7th.
Correct.
At this point, I will say we have quorum, but I'll go to Councillor Everett.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and I certainly agree with your last comment that we're elected to carry out our duties to the November 7th date, and each individual council makes a determination whether or not there's a perceived conflict of interest from theirs. You can never stop anybody else from accusing you of what they believe, so you have to go with your own conscience and do the right thing. And you're a councillor for the term, and you can't just jump out for the election period and then come back in later. You have to do it for the whole thing. So I think the vote is fair.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship. The information that Mr. Babbage provided has put my mind at rest. I do not believe I am in a conflict of interest. As stated, that campaign contributions don't put us in a conflict of interest. We've seen numerous applications from this individual throughout the term. I've voted yes on some, no on some. I vote based on the information, and it is our duty to keep an open mind when we come into these meetings. So that's what I'll be doing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, we have a recommendation. I'm going to do them separately. We have recommendation 1, please. Thank you, Councillor Everett. Seconder, Councillor McConaughey. All those in favor in the room, those opposed in the room, those opposed on Zoom, that is carried 6-0. I think my numbers are correct, Ms. Connolly. Recommendation number 2, please. Thank you, Councillor Everett. Seconder, please. Councillor Sampson, all those in favor in the room, opposed in the room, opposed on Zoom, that carries 6-0. Thank you. Well, we'll bring in Councillor Frizzell and Skaken, and we'll move on to D10. All right, D10 is rezoning application number RZ100759, bylaw number 9337. Before I go to Ms. Wozniak, Councillor Skaken.
Thank you, Worship. Again, I got a significant contribution from this group here. With all due respect, I'm going to back out because of the perception of a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wozniak, rezoning application number RZ100759, bylaw number 9337, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, the applicant has applied to rezone the subject property from C4L local commercial to C4LC local commercial, as shown on Appendix A to bylaw number 9337. The addition of the C to the C4L zone would allow for retail cannabis as a permanent use on the subject property. The applicant is currently operating their business on the subject property under temporary use permit number TU 000069. Your Worship, again, this application will not have a public hearing because it is consistent with the official community plan, and administration is supportive of this application, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Frizzell, this is for first and second reading.
Thank you, Mayor Hall, through to Ms. Wozniak or Ms. Connolly. I don't know if this was covered in the last one, but when we are approaching the end of term and we're getting first and second readings, that means that at best we will finish third in the next meeting and then final reading in the one after. Wondering if you could just speak to the continuance of council and how council is a continuing body and that makes sense to leave these hanging for the next council.
I would look to Ms. Connolly to answer that question, Your Worship.
So, Your Worship, through to Councillor Frizzell, we do have a public hearing intended to be held for this application, given its relation to the retail cannabis designation in the zoning bylaw. We will be conducting a notification as per the requirements for a public hearing that may fall at the next meeting of this council, dependent on the timelines for public notice, both by mail and by newspaper.
Thank you. And the point being that council is a continuing body, and even if something doesn't get done by the 8 or 9 that are around here, it will get done by Prince George City Council at some point.
That's correct, Your Worship. The application will be brought back to council.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Frizzell. Council, we have first and second reading at D10, please.
First and second reading.
Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. Councillor Everett, all those in favor in the room, opposed in the room, opposed on Zoom. That carries 7-0. Thank you.